Right, welcome back. So today we're going to learn how to play Strathspeys. A Strathspey is essentially it's a Celtic dancing tune. It's made for dancing. That's the whole point of it. And you can dance Strathspeys in groups, or you can dance them individually. And typically you'll see Highland dancers would do Strathspeys as part of their competition routine. Now, pipers, they play it to the bagpipes, and if you've ever had the opportunity to play for a dancer, that's by far and large the fastest way to learn how to play a Strathspey, because you'll soon realize if you're not interpreting or expressing the music correctly, it makes it hard for the dancer to find that balance, and so they become a bit too heavy, in the sense that they're not able to get a lot of flair into their dancing. And if you watch the way that Highland dancers dance, they typically go up and down quite a bit. And so it's fairly strenuous, and it's very hard to get a balance where it looks really graceful or becomes really graceful. And it can be unbelievably graceful given the right balance between the music and the dancing. But it can also be very flat, in the sense that if you're as a piper not playing it with the correct level of expression or enough expression to create lift for the dancer's going to feel that. They will feel that you're holding them back a little bit, and it's becoming a bit stodgy. So it's a Strathspey. It's something that's got a fair bit of lilt in it. Now let's talk about the mechanics here. So a Strathspey is, like any other tune, relies a lot on phrasing to create the expression needed to provide the impulsion for dancing. What's different about the Strathspey's phrasing is that it uses 4 beat phrases. So in other words, each bar in a Strathspey, 1, 2, 3, 4, is a phrase. If you want to find out more about phrasing, there's a separate video on phrasing that goes into much greater detail about phrasing and how it works. And so please have a look at that if you're not sure what that is before you continue here. And so the phrasing is 4 beats. If you look at a lot of other tunes, they like, marches, 2/4 marches, those sorts of things. Typically, they have 4 bar phrases. So they're 16 beat phrases. And so for the dancing, the phrases come much faster and furiouser than they do in other paradigms, like marches. And so you really need to be, when you're playing them, you need to be aware that 4-beat cycle just keeps turning and turning and turning, and you've got to be really switched on to make sure that you're playing the first beat nice and strong, and the 4th beat you're going to be using what's called passing notes to create the lift into the next phrase. Okay, that's kind of like a full stop, if you will, at the end of a sentence that joins the sentences into, much like language, into phrases that make sense to the listener and create a certain emotion or logical discord, if you will, depending on which side you look at. Now, putting this into practice, when you play many bass sections in pipe bands, certainly pipe bands that come from this planet will play what's called a Strathspey idiom, which will be strong, weak, medium, weak. So the beats go 1, 2, 3, 4, and it goes strong, which is accentuated, more accentuation on that beat. Weak is the second beat, the third beat is medium, and then the 4th beat is light as well, which is weak. And that creates the upstroke, which is kind of like the breath or the pause or the full stop, which then gives you the roll over into the next phrase, which is back on the accentuated beat. And so what you're doing is you're linking phrases together into kind of like a story, right? So that whole, once you put all 8 phrases of the first part of a Strathspey, link them all together, you will essentially have a part, and that part is kind of like a story. And also what's important to understand is that you want to be playing through the bars, and drummers will talk a lot about that. So they'll be playing the first bar, and they'll be thinking through the bar. So you don't just stop on the 4th beat and then start on the first beat again. You link the phrases. So you want to use that passing note to its maximum effect to get back to the first beat of the next phrase or the next bar. How do we do that? So Strathspeys, we use a little bit of poetic license when it comes to the piping. The drumming's different because they can use percussion. They've got the ability to create an accented note or a lighter note just by how hard or soft they strike the vellum. Piping is a monotonous, but monotone instruments. I don't even know if that's the correct terminology, but I think you get the idea. It's plays at a certain volume, and you can't really adjust the volume. Well, not with much effect that will make sense to the listener. So you need to create this impression of volume, and the way that's done is you basically use a little bit of poetic license, and you will essentially ever so slightly overhold certain things and overcut certain things. So for example, if you played a note and you held it a tiny bit longer, it creates that impression that it's accentuated, right? Because in relation to all the other notes, it seems like it's expressed, okay? And so it performs the same effect as a drummer accentuating a note. And so coming back to the drumming paradigm, strong, weak, medium, weak. So strong will be the first beat of every bar, of every phrase, every 4-beat phrase. And so for the piping, you want to be pulsing out that first beat. It's a very subtle thing to get it just right. You don't want to overdo it because then it can become too stodgy, and you don't want to underdo it because then it starts to sound like another type of paradigm, which is not a Strathspey. And so if you take like the tune that we're going to work on now, which is Over the Bows to Ballindoik. I don't even know if that's pronounced correctly. Please correct me if I'm wrong. This tune, if you take the first 2 phrases, bar 1 and 2, it's got a long high A before it grips, so it goes dee da 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 ba dee da da da. Okay, so you really pulse out that high A, dee da da ba dee da 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 dee da 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 dum ba da dum, and so that's your first strong beat in the phrase. Now the other part of this equation is at the end of the phrase. You need to remember to apply the passing notes, right? And so what this means is, in that first bar it goes dee da 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 ba da 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 da, and it goes E, F in the last group. Group 4 of bar 1 goes E, F. The E is short and the F is long. Relative to each other, they're a ratio of 1 to 3 because one's a semiquaver, the other's a dotted quaver. And so what that means is, normally you'd play it da. If you played it according to the music as it's written, would be dee da 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 da. Okay, you're playing that on a piano. On the pipes, you're going to use that poetic license, right? So you're going to slightly overexpress it in the first beat, but still staying within the actual tempo. You don't want to change the tempo. And on the 4th beat, that E, you'll cut it ever so slightly more than it's actually written. And then the F, you'll hold ever so slightly longer than it's actually written. And so that creates that sort of simulation of the drumming upstroke. And so you'll be holding onto the F and you'll hold over into the next bar where you hit the high A. And so how does that sound? It goes dee da da ba da 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 dee. Right, and you just pulse it out on that F, cut the E a tiny bit more. Like I say, it's very subtle. You don't want to adjust the tempo. But if you do that in Strathspeys, as a general rule, getting the balance right, then suddenly it becomes much easier for dancers to dance with. It sounds more like a dancing tune. And even more importantly, if you're playing in a pipe band, your piping and drumming will integrate much better, because you're going to be diverging slightly and then coming together again. And so you're creating that sort of effect where the drumming and piping really comes strongly together on the first beat, based on playing it according to that method. So I'm going to move on now and actually play that specific tune that I mentioned. So I've set it up for you. I'll play it at this video will be 80 beats per minute on 4/4, fairly slow, so you can learn it and get the idea. And the music will follow across the top of the screen. The red notes that you see will be the held notes. When I say held, they poetically over-licensedly held, if that makes sense. And the blue notes are poetically over-licensedly slightly more cut. Okay, but once again, staying within the tempo. I'll play it with trying to hear, you'll be able to hear it as go to the screen, and you can come back, you can look at the music if you need to, and you can look at the fingers to see how you're going with that. And also there'll be a tempo backing track with that beat paradigm created in the background. So you'll be able to hear for the first beat, which is a very bass type of thud, and then the passing note typically will be a hi-hat sound, which is played exactly where that passing note should be in the subdivision. And so here we go.